friends. It's almost midnight, and you found your way to the PikeCast. Come along as we careen through the catalog of the most formative horror writer of our young adult days, Christopher Pike. From adult perspectives, we'll revisit these YA books our parents probably would never have let us read had they known what lie inside. We tackle one book per episode in a freewheeling and unbiased chat. So grab your battered paperback, pull the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, climb under your bed covers, and devour a good book with us.
Greetings, fellow Pikers, and welcome to the PikeCast. I'm Cooper Beckett, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my lovely co-hosts.
Hello, I'm Cassie.
Hi, I'm Becca.
Today, we are digging into Christopher Pike's 1993 book, The Wicked Heart. I'm going to be discussing it in great detail, spoiling each and every plot twist, so you consider yourself warned. If you're enjoying the PikeCast, please leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. And we are so excited to welcome back Toni Cunningham, filmmaker, screenwriter, and host of the podcast Sibling Nerdlery, as our guest piker for the week. Thank you so much for coming back, Toni.
I'm so excited to be back. Thank you guys for having me.
We are thrilled. We are thrilled. And if you are curious about Toni's answers for the guest questions, just jump on back to episode 8 because we don't need to rehash that.
Exactly, yes.
So how have you been since episode 8, Toni?
I was going to say, it's been a minute. I've been good, though. I've been good. I've been doing a lot of reading, remembering a lot of things about these Christopher Pike books that I had not remembered from my youth, and and just, getting day to day in this weird pandemic world we're living in. So, yeah.
That's what this podcast is all about, discovering things we've otherwise repressed from our youth.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, let's just dive right into the book. Who's going to read the let me try that again. Okay. Wow. Let's move to Magic Fire, our section about the physical book. Who is going to read the back of the book this week?
Me also. Me still.
You still, yes. See, I was going to cut that part before.
I know, Cooper,
so
I'm
you
just
saying
fucking
me,
with you.
Again, there, you just make me sound foolish. You know that, right?
We're doing so good right now.
Well, okay, Cassie. Why don't you read the back of the book?
Okay.
I feel like Cassie is up to no good.
Because it says he did not want to kill it. I feel like Cooper wants to kill me right now. So.
With that hammer.
No, I did not want to kill you. Don't worry. I did not want to.
Okay. He did not want to kill. Dusty Shame was a high school senior and a serial killer. Already he has murdered 3 young women, and he has more planned. Yet Dusty did not want to hurt anybody. There was something inside him, or perhaps outside him, that compelled him to kill. Sheila Hardolt had lost her best friend to Dusty's insane attacks. It will be her task to probe the clues Dusty has left at the site of each of his murders. Clues that will point her to the past, to a time when a large portion of mankind lost all sense of decency. There she will find the seed of Dusty's evil compulsion, the wicked heart, and the reason why it did not die the first time it was destroyed. Dun dun dun.
That was actually a pretty good summary, I feel like, of this
Yeah,
book.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's funny because it seems like it's spoiler filled,
right?
But with as quickly as we're introduced to serial killer Dusty, it really isn't. Now I did some looking here. American Psycho came out in 1991, and I feel like this may have been slightly influenced by the first person, the lead serial killer thing.
I've never seen that.
I can see that.
The book
actually
came out in 91. Yeah.
I've never seen the movie or read the book. Sorry.
Well, the movie is a lot of fun.
Yes.
The book is less fun.
I'm going to recommend that you watch that movie, Cassie.
Yeah, definitely watch the movie.
Yeah.
Hang on, where's my pen? I'll write it down right
but
now.
the book, it's weird since it's first person, and it's so matter of fact about the murder stuff.
Yeah.
That it sort of gets inside your head like after I would finish reading for a while, I felt like I had done those things.
Who wrote the book?
Yes.
Bret Easton Ellis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were asking who wrote this book. And I was like, Cassie, you're on the wrong podcast.
Christopher Pike.
So confused.
But no, Cooper, like what you said, like that's why I don't know. I mean, obviously it's been since episode 8 since I've been back, but that's what I said then. Is I was like, this book scared me almost more than any other Christopher Pike book scared me, and it always stuck with me. And it was because it was for that reason. It made me feel like I had done something wrong. Like it really got into my psyche in a way that some of his other books hadn't.
And that's the thing about matter of fact stuff. You know, like if you're writing murder, our default is to make the character either feel significant shame about it or significant glee about it. And if they're feeling glee, you know, you associate as the reader, I would not be gleeful about this, so it's not like me. If there's shame, you understand the shame, but nothing, blank. You don't know what to do with that as a reader.
Yeah.
So, and like in American Psycho, it would be like, oh, I took the videotapes out of my locker where on the top shelf I had the skinless head of, and it's just like, oh, dear God. Yeah, it's, it is, I mean, I really, I didn't enjoy the book, but it is a very good book. And it is an excellent movie. And it's the movie really leans into the satire in a way that I think is pretty brilliant. And it's written and directed by a woman, Mary Herron.
Yes. And had that humor been in the book would have been a little bit more enjoyable. That book is hard to read.
It really is. It really is. So let's get back to this book.
Yes.
So let's talk about the artwork.
Wait, can we pause real quick? I want to go back to the synopsis.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So I just wanted to say that I did not read the synopsis before reading this because I never do. So
I never do either.
Right. Yeah. Imagine my surprise in chapter 1 where Dusty's like, yeah, I killed somebody. Like, I was like, Mr. Pike! Mr. Pike! I was so shocked. And then, okay, I got one more thing to bring up about Mr. Pike. The dedication. Did you see the dedication?
That was one of my notes.
No, I didn't notice it.
He dedicated. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cassie.
No, you can go ahead.
Or
You
not
can read
Cassie,
the dedication
Cooper.
if you want.
I just called you every single name on this podcast. I said Cassie, Cooper, Becca.
Okay. My mom doesn't know.
I mean, if you do that, you're going to get somebody.
I was going to say, I told Cooper beforehand, but I fell asleep at 6:00 this morning, so I'm not 100% sharp. I apologize. But
I'm like sleepy all the time, so I understand.
Okay. But no, he dedicated it to himself.
Yeah.
He was like for those.
Really?
Yes, he was like for those long. What did it say? That the story written during those dark nights.
Yeah, like Mr. Pike, are you okay?
I know.
I love it so much. Oh my god. Okay, sorry.
Wow. Okay.
I like that. We just got really excited about that part.
Well, because I know it's super interesting because I think that's the first time he's done that, isn't it? Like of all these books, has he done that? Yeah. It interests me too that like, and I don't know about you guys having read this a second time, but I read this when it came out, and if it came out in 91, then I was 11. But I feel like this was 91 or 93?
93. This was 93.
So I was 13. I don't think I had the history to I don't remember Nazis in this, and that's a whole book was Nazis, and I don't remember that at all. So I thought it was really interesting that like the historical Nazi, more kind of grounded, real world type horror story that Christopher Pike was telling in this book was the one that he dedicated to himself. I was like, that's really interesting.
That's really odd. Yeah.
Love it.
Well, now the artwork here, we've got the hammer.
It's the wrong hammer. It's the wrong hammer. It's the wrong hammer.
Well, not only is it the wrong hammer, I mean, I'm noting that it's the left-handed person too.
How is it the wrong hammer?
Oh yeah.
The hammer's supposed to be like one of those little types with the little round ball at the end. Like,
well, you can't see the end. It's behind the K.
You can see it.
I guess. Look on the.
You can see.
Oh no, I don't see anything, Cassie.
Oh no, it is a claw hammer. You're right.
Yeah, I see the little spiky things coming through the eye and the pike.
Okay, it is the wrong hammer.
And you can see the front of it when it hits the head. It's flat.
No. He wasn't using a ball peen hammer The ball peen part, he was using the hammer part. It was just a different type of hammer. It was a smaller hammer.
I thought he was using the kind of hammer that has like the round thing because it's smaller.
He was, but the round thing's at the back.
Yeah, it's not here.
No, I know. This is a claw hammer. You're right.
With the two things where you pull out the nails.
Yeah. Claw hammer. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know the names of hammers, Cooper. I did wrong.
I didn't even know there were multiple hammers. So
Yes, there is a ball peen hammer and a claw hammer.
I just looked at the cover because I was reading that and I was like, what the fuck is ball peen? That sounds just like that's inappropriate. Those are two inappropriate words together to joke. And so I looked at the cover and I was like, that's a hammer. And then I was like, no, that's not. That's a regular ass hammer. What the? And then I had to look it up and I was like, that's not that hammer.
So you went into a hammer deep dive.
You know what I did? I Googled ball peen, which was a mistake.
That's awesome.
So I'm picturing your Google results as like one row of actual hammer results and then the rest just
ball peens.
Awful ball and cock shots. All right. So do we feel that this accurately captures what's inside the book?
I would say
Except for the fact that it's a claw hammer and not a ball peen.
And a statue or something.
Yeah. Well, that was,
but that's metaphorical.
Fair. Okay. And she's got eyeballs.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of the less literal covers. Most of the covers are fairly literal.
Yeah, I do think it is. Like, he's even got like little gloves on and stuff.
Well, let's move to the Midnight Club and start discussing our characters here. Continuing Christopher Pike's terrible last name habit, and a pretty bad first name, honestly. Let's start with Dusty Shane.
Like, why is that what he chose to go with?
I know.
And then when I'm looking at your list, right, on Trello, and I was like, who the hell is Mother Shame?
I know, I thought that too.
Shame.
I thought the same thing. I was like, Cooper, what? She has a name.
I couldn't find her name when I was doing. Give me a break.
Reminds me of Mother Gothel from Tangled.
I literally thought the same thing. I was like, wait. And then I thought like maybe there was a nun or something that I missed.
Oh my god.
She didn't have a name for most of the book, you know.
She didn't. Yeah, it was like
until the
end.
reveal.
Yeah.
So I will say they wouldn't have been able to do the dust storm thing, like the metaphors for that, without Dusty as his name.
Well, yeah, but like, okay, I get it. They're ashamed of their past, so they name themselves Shame. Come on.
I'll say this.
That is so strange.
Dusty was, again, I was 13 at this time, which was right around the time I had my first boyfriend, whose name was also Dusty, who also had green eyes. So I think that is part of the reason this book was so endeared to me and so terrifying to me, is because I was like reading it and thinking that like my little middle school boyfriend was going to murder me. So the name stuck with me for that reason.
Oh, clearly, yeah.
Yes.
So Dusty did not play by any rules. He had killed twice in his life, and he was going to kill again. Like, this is the first line of the book. That's really, balls out here, Pike. Ball peens, in fact. He's 18 years old. He was on his way to college, and if he didn't make a quick stop at the electric chair first. He was a handsome young man. His hair was light brown, soft and fine, like that of an angel. His eyes green as grass in evening twilight. He was 5'10", fit and muscular, but plagued by repeated heartburn. He had a tendency, when in social situations, to be jerky in his movements, but when he was alone, especially when he killed, he moved smoothly and gracefully as a dancer.
It struck me that an 18-year-old would have chronic heartburn. I found that to be interesting as a character statement. You know
and it doesn't come up.
Not at all.
Like it's not important. So
maybe that's just something Pike has.
Maybe, probably, yeah. Well, and like also he should have constant heartburn because he's like downing like 4 aspirin and drinking 4 cans of Coke at a time.
He is not taking good care of himself.
Who drinks 4 cans of soda in a row like that, too? I feel like my stomach would burst.
Yeah.
I do.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
No shame. I legitimately,
No,
I drink part of a soda and I'm like, oh God, I'm so full. Like, it makes me so, bloated.
Yeah, same.
See, I don't drink coffee. I've never drank coffee, so my entire caffeine fix is soda. And, I drink a lot of it.
That's fair. I think the carbonation is what gets me. It's bubbly. It's very bubbly.
It is very bubbly. There's some interesting stuff about Dusty here, and I don't really know the history of Spectrum people and when let me think of how I'm going to say this before I say it. I don't really know when the definitions of people being on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, started to come around. I was curious about he was particularly sensitive to crowds and crowd noise. It was as if the mental static of many minds wore on the delicate centers of his brain. That felt like people with autism who can't be around.
Oh, we took that very differently.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I actually have that highlighted as well. To me, I was like, I think this was the first time I ever read somebody talking about an empath or somebody with one of the 7 clairs.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Which would make him a little bit more available for the psychic, kind of like takeover that he is suffering throughout the remaining
Very
of this
true.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what it was is I'd never really thought of him as psychic.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we got to the end, I mean, like, I get it. I get what they're doing. I took this a lot more literal than I think the book wanted me to take it. I think it was going for mystical, and I was just like, no, he's just kind of fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, I think just having that kind of understanding of Pike and knowing that he's into, dream and astral and all that kind of stuff is kind of what triggered me to think. Well, also, I consider myself an empath, and I have a really hard time in crowds.
Okay, yeah. It is ballsy to throw us in out of nowhere where we're used to Pike's characters being the good guys, and instead giving us a serial killer. Very matter of fact, out of nowhere. How did that play for everybody? I'm very curious.
I think it's what intrigues me the most, honestly, about this book. I don't know about intrigue me, but it's definitely the reason that this book stuck with me out of all of the books that I've read of his, because it was something that was very different. But then I also really wondered, to go back to the fact that he had dedicated to himself, like how much of Dusty is Pike.
Yeah. Well, we all have those things bubbling under the surface that we don't want to deal with.
Of course. And after, like, we had talked a little bit about the whether or not Dusty was maybe Spectrum or empath. But then, and on page 12, he says something, a gust of warm air, perhaps a brush of astral matter, maybe left her body, left her lifeless, and touched him as it passed. So he kind of set me up within the first 10 pages,
sure,
for some mystical things that, but not to the point that some of the other characters in the other books have had. Like, I know you guys just read Witch, and for a book about a witch, I was expecting more of that kind of mystical stuff, but we got it in this.
More witches, you mean?
More witches. Exactly. But we got it in, or at least to me, I got it in Dusty. I know that you didn't read that character that way, which makes sense also.
Right.
But for me, I did get it through him. I found Dusty to have some sort of like a psychic ability. Maybe he wasn't aware of it. He wasn't practicing witchcraft or anything like that, but his mind, and it's kind of what the old cop at the end of the book said, like his mind was open enough to receive, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Cassie, Becca, what do you think?
I think when I was reading it, so I'm autistic, and so while I was reading it, a lot of the things he thought, both when I was younger and now, I did identify with. Obviously not the murdering and stuff.
Yes. Let's just read it as expected, that none of us actually want to kill people.
Right, yes.
No matter how we may or may not identify with the lead character here.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I didn't actually I don't think I ever specifically identified him as that, but I do think I do see what you're saying, or why you would have picked up on that, since those specific things are kind of like, they are trademarks and traits that are characteristic with people who are on the spectrum, and they are characteristics that I've had to deal with my whole life. And so that is interesting to like know, hey, I related to this like weird, cold, distant guy who had trouble with crowds and other people and relationships when I was like 13, and I still do. Yay. And I'm autistic. So yeah, that's an interesting little thing I didn't have with that book when I was younger that I do see now.
Well, and I think too, it was super 90s in that he is like kind of the epitome of like the misunderstood sad boy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like that was something that was very attractive during that decade to a lot of young girls. So I thought it was a really smart character for Pike to lead his book with, because it automatically made him you automatically wanted to, if not like, at least understand or try to understand him in a way that took you through the book. And when you're trying to understand a mass murderer, you start questioning yourself. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll actually shout out to the movie The Stylist by Jill Six, which is one of my favorite movies of the year.
Is that super short, right?
What?
Is it super short?
Oh no, there is a short.
Oh, okay. Because I just saw something on
also
Twitter. Sorry. Okay, I didn't.
Yeah,
I
there's
thought
also
it
a
was that.
feature about it. Yeah.
Okay.
But throughout the book, it's throughout the movie, it's a woman who's trying desperately to fit in, and she thinks she's fit in, but she hasn't. And it's the rejection, and she's also a serial killer. But at the same time, there's this metaphorical thing about just trying to reveal your true self to people and not actually having to wear a mask anymore. And then when they don't like it, then you fall back to your ways of wearing the mask and or killing people. And so it's that weird thing of strongly identifying with a character who is, by all accounts, a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I highly recommend The Stylist. It's a brilliant film.
I hadn't heard of it before. That's good to know.
Yeah,
I think with Dusty's character specifically too is because it both then when I read it at first, like as a teen, and then now, like I know that he's bad and I know the stuff he's doing is bad, but like I wouldn't describe him as a monster. Like because like they make it so clear that he doesn't want to be doing what he's doing. He's just in so much pain. And I'm not just so we're clear. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying that's the right choice. Like if that were me, I probably would have chosen to do what he did in the end, probably earlier on, because I don't know that I could just go out murdering people.
Sure.
But I think it's a little different in that it's not just like, he's not the cold, Nazi one, like just getting pleasure from it. He's legitimately like, he's just getting some kind of like relief from the pain they're causing to make him do it.
But Cassie, wouldn't you be willing to say that someone who uses murder to release their own pain is a monster?
I mean, he's a teenager though, and he's had like a tough life. So he doesn't have, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying he hasn't been given the tools to make the proper decisions.
No, but this is what I'm saying. This is exactly why it was the smartest choice for Pike to make
it really
this
is. Yeah,
it is.
Because look, I'm not trying to go out here and date Dusty, okay? But I'm just saying, like, it's life is hard sometimes. You gotta make hard choices.
My God. I feel like you're like digging yourself more.
Yeah,
what's so funny?
You're right. You're right.
Life is hard as an autistic person trying to relate to other people, where I'm just like, oh shit, I said the wrong thing.
I mean, to be fair, though, I do agree with you because, like, there was not one point in this book where I was like, wow, Dusty's a shitty person. Like,
Yeah.
I never thought that while reading
No,
it.
yeah,
He was doing some fucked up shit.
Yeah,
right,
he
he's not
was.
getting like enjoyment from it. It's not like the other people who were standing there like with their eyes closed and small smiles on their faces. Like, oh, he's like, dude, I haven't slept in a fucking week. Please leave me alone. Like, stop nibbling my ears, you fucking roach. I'm tired.
Right.
Like, he's breaking mentally, I think, and he's been under a lot of strain and stress. So I think he just needs help. I really think he needs help. Like, he should go to jail or like a high maximum security like asylum or something to get that help. But I don't think he's a monster.
I think that's fair because I think at the end of the day, Scheimer is the monster. Scheimer and Himmler, and obviously Hitler are the monsters. If we have to go.
That is the easy out. Right. The Nazis are the monsters.
They are the monsters. And
where is the lie?
Right. Well, and where does mom come in? You know, where in the monster spectrum, like, does she come in?
Absolutely. But before we get there, let's talk about our other POV character, Sheila Hardholt.
I like her. She's spunky. She's a typical Pike girl. Like,
she is.
Yeah.
So I think this is like the one, but I like alternating perspectives most of the time, to be honest. Like, I am a fan of them. Mm-hmm. But like, I think that it worked really well with this book because it's like you have Dusty Shame versus Sheila, and it's just like nice to see like where one's located while the other one's trying to find.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That was neat. All right, Cassie, sorry.
No, you're good. I just wanted to say, like, I think I liked her. I will say that, but I also think she's a little bit unrealistic because what teen girl is going to go up to a cop and be like, well, actually, I wanted to work with you directly.
Right.
Like,
right.
No,
what kind of cop says okay?
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad I wasn't alone in that. That really got to me.
That was a note for me too. And that is the same thing happened with Monster.
Yes, it happens in a lot of Pike's books. He's like, oh, cops and kids, they're best friends and share info. No, they aren't, and no, they don't.
I was like, what cop is going to give all of this information to like an 18-year-old girl? Like, that's not going to happen.
God.
But
it is really funny that Pike has this sort of duality of the idealized cop and the worse than normal cop.
Yeah.
Because he goes in those two directions. There are very few middle of the road just cops.
It's true.
That's fair. Yeah. I will say though that I like Sheila as well for the most part, but like the level of like mooning and heartbrokenness was a bit excessive for me.
Yeah.
Like, I understand you're hurt, but like there's some other important stuff going on, which she knows because she's trying to solve the mystery with Lieutenant Black. Is that his name? Yeah. But also she's like, the last page of the book is like, oh, they're back together. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, I literally wrote boo on that page.
Yeah. That was the worst epilogue I've ever read in my life.
Yeah,
I thought her boyfriend was gay. I thought he was going to.
That would have been a cute twist.
I know. Well, I thought that's what. Not even no hate or anything. I legit thought that he was like, okay, like, because they talked about how they had sex and then he would pull away a bit, and like then he decided like, my feelings have changed. I realized this isn't actually what I want. I thought he was going to tell her he was gay. I don't think they could
do that back then.
Maybe.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I don't know. That would have been.
I mean, there have definitely been queer-coded characters in Pike, but I don't know that there have
nobody
ever
else
been.
Get that vibe from him with his long hair and his silk shirts.
Well, now I do.
His open button.
Now that you say it, I get it. But like, for me, I was like, I really kind of thought it was funny the way that they introduced him, because like he's like in a public library with his feet up reading a Playboy. Like, what the hell? Like, this guy gives
another articles. He was legit like there for the articles, and I know. You guys have told me about how the articles work in these books, but like, I feel like any other teen boy would not be reading it for the articles.
No, that's very true. And but so also, no one's reading it at a library.
That's true.
Not,
no,
like,
that's fair.
Public,
but like.
Yeah.
I feel like Pike wanted to make him gay, and the publisher maybe was like, no.
Give him a Playboy.
Yeah, and so at the end, they get back together, and that's why the epilogue is so shitty. I'm sorry, Pike, I'm sorry. But it's so shitty. It's short,
and
it's shitty, and rushed.
It's only like a page and a half, too.
It made me angry. I wish I could rip it out of my book.
Well, and I think
he was just like, I need to add an epilogue, and that was it.
On the subject of like Matt possibly being gay, that actually might be for the early 90s. What was it? Obviously a different time. But perhaps a gay teenager would read a Playboy in public at the library to like sniff off the trail. that
Yes.
he's not
Oh,
a
yeah,
gay
very
boy.
true.
You know what I mean? So maybe there's some layers here that I just didn't see before regarding his sexuality.
Well, while we're talking about Matt J, let's talk about Matt J. He had always thought he was attractive. She had always thought he was attractive, especially his long brown hair, which he wore in a ponytail like Steven Seagal. That hasn't aged well.
No.
No, it has not.
His GPA ranged in the high threes. He didn't do hard drugs, and he had a good paying job. On the other hand, his grade point average was high because he took mostly art and music classes. He drank too much beer, like everyone, and he was a bartender in a strip joint downtown.
Damn king.
He got the job by presenting a fake ID and demonstrating phenomenal mixing skills he had picked up from an alcoholic uncle. What? I mean, like, that's a character bio, for fuck's sake. That's not even just an introduction.
His GPA is probably high because he reads Playboy in public in the library.
Right, for the articles.
For the articles, yeah. There's an article in here about searching for buried treasure, which is something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
That is never explored in the rest of the book.
They never bring it up again. Like, it's just
Never
so
again.
random.
I thought for sure they were setting something up there. Yeah, I know. You know what? He's far more interesting if he's closeted gay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And like, honestly, I don't, like, I'm not super into his character or whatever. He was basic, and I didn't like that she was so, although I will say, different to Toni a little bit. I found it relatable at the time when I was younger because I have been broken up with when I've been like completely consumed and I'm like, why don't you love me? You know, like, and it's pathetic. And after, you know, thinking about it back then, but
well, I mean, it's high school only love.
Yeah.
I mean,
right. And so I did think that was believable that she kept going back to it, but he was so basic. He was another oatmeal guy to me in these books.
Yeah.
And then at the end, the way he does that weird twist, that's what really irked me because it made me not like him because he's like, but now she's my woman. No, she's not. You decided you did not want her. You don't get her now. Like, and then she's just like, I haven't gone anywhere. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
That made me very angry, in fact. Yeah,
I didn't appreciate it.
Now she's my woman.
So I'm just going to rewrite it that they are best friends and he is gay and he moves on and they both have great lives as friends. And that's the epilogue.
I like that ending better. Yes,
Yeah.
I'll go with you on that one. Yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Woo,
Not to
sorry,
argue with
Christopher
that.
Pike.
Not to argue with that because I do think that.
I mean, you can argue with that.
Oh,
you know, we don't
no,
have to agree on everything.
No, that's true, but I'm on your guys' side, so I'm not arguing it because I agree with you. But, however, I don't know. I think it's mentioned in the book, but maybe I'm just thinking about it. Anyway, so my thing is that like when you are in like a dangerous situation, you do start to realize like. Not saying he should claim to own her, but like I get why he would be like, oh wait, I am in love with her after all, and I gotta keep her safe because like danger does that to somebody. Like life-threatening situations will make you reevaluate people in your life. So again, I do not agree because like, or I agree with you guys. I don't agree with the fact that he said that like, hey, she's mine. Like that's fucked up. Like no, she ain't. However. I get why he would go back, want to have her back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I feel like the fact that he never really detailed why they shouldn't be together, like literally their breakup was nothing.
Okay, so on that situation, I'm sorry. Their breakup means a lot
Becca,
to me.
this is an intervention. You need to stop apologizing for your opinion.
I'm not sorry.
Good.
So I relate heavy to the breakup of Sheila and Matt on both sides because I have, like Cassie, been the Sheila in the situation. However, I've also been the Matt, where like my last breakup was nothing. Like it was just like I just wasn't vibing anymore, and I think that's perfectly fine. Like my last breakup, I was just like, I don't want to be with you because I just don't want to be with you. Like there was no reason, there was nothing wrong with him. I just didn't want him. And I wanted to be alone because I just wasn't feeling it anymore. Right. And I think that's perfectly fine. Because, like, I just didn't want to be with him. Like, that was it. That was the whole thing. It had nothing to do with him. He's a perfectly fine human. Even though he thinks I did other things, but that's beside the point. My point was that I just didn't, I wanted to not be with him. And I kind of feel like that's what Matt was going with. Like, you don't have to have a reason to break up with somebody.
No, in
like,
real life, absolutely. In fiction, you do.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys something about me that I don't talk about ever. So
we're having a relationship talk today.
Yeah, let's go into this. So from the time that I was 12 until I turned turned 21, shortly after I turned 21, I was dating a guy off and on, 12 to 21.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
God damn.
He, throughout that entire time we were together, we were, we lived together when we were older. Like once we aged, we were adults. He's gay. He ended up being gay and he struggled with that. And I did not know. So it was like a very like out of nowhere thing for us. And it did, when I was reading this, I legit like, I read this book for the first time before that it happened to me and I did not read it again after. I think if I had, I would have been like reading into it way more because that, I think that's why it struck me so much this time is that conversation they were having where he was like, I love you. I'm just not into this. And like, he couldn't explain why. And he was really struggling. Like that part for me, I was like, he's gay. He's so gay. Like, I was just like, I've lived this conversation. I've had like this heartbreak. Like this is a thing. Like, and so I think that's for me why there is probably some bias from my own life that I'm reading it that way.
Sure.
Whereas Becca, for you, because of your personal relationships in the situation, you're like, oh, I see this. He's just not into it anymore. So I think that's probably why we're like seeing it with those two different
But
lenses.
let me tell you something. I feel like I got called out just now because
Whoa.
Well, no, in a good way.
Okay.
My breakup of I'm not vibing. After that breakup, I have gone on this journey of like my sexuality exploration. Like, because I personally, at the age of 30, do not know if I like guys, and I feel like that was one of the reasons that I didn't. That you're not vibing. This guy. Yeah. Because I'm like, maybe I just don't like men, and I was told to like men my whole life.
Sure.
And now I'm just really confused, which is why I'm staying solo until I figure that out.
Which is fair and understandable. And and so I think, that is interesting too then.
But with this being said, winky face to all the ladies. I am not straight.
It's like the tagline for this episode.
Winky
That
face
being
to all the
said,
ladies.
winky face to the ladies.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Oh my God.
I just want to announce to the world because like somebody told me the other day, they were like, because I was like, I don't think girls like me. Like, I just don't think that like they care for me like in that way. And my friend was like, it's probably because you're so cute and they think that when you compliment them, you're just being nice. And I'm like, no, it's because I am 100% not straight.
Yeah.
Wow.
She's like, that's me flirting. No, but I can understand that too as somebody who does not know how to flirt and will just be overly nice. But also I am nice to all people most of the time, unless I have a reason not to. So it's really hard because my niceness is the same whether I'm like into somebody or just like friendly. Obviously there's like a line. Like I don't get like talking about business or anything like that, like, but I will like, I'll be smiling, be like, oh, do you want to go hang out? Do you want to do this? Whether it's like a friend or somebody who I'm into as more than a friend. So the other person, is sometimes like, is this a date or do you just want to hang out? Like, are we, so that's, I think it's understandable. And I think that's something too in this, when I was reading it, when they were talking about how if they could be just friends or whatever, I was like, I feel like y'all should just have a little bit of time apart and like just so he can come to terms with his personal things he's dealing with, and you can just like, I really wish the ending of this.
Well, that's the thing about these kind of relationships is when you decide just friends, there's the desperation to remain friends immediately, and very few people can remain friends immediately. Yeah.
Which is fair because somebody's feelings are always hurt, and sometimes both, sometimes just one, but it's rough. Relationships are hard.
They are.
They sure are.
These poor teens. And then they've got a fucking serial killer too? Come on.
Can life get any worse?
Not only relationship problems, but serial killers and Nazi ghosts.
And cockroaches.
Oh, God.
So now let's get back to Sheila, because we really spent the entire time talking about maps. Sheila knew she wasn't bad looking, not a potential model or actress by any stretch of the imagination. But on a good day, she had been known to turn heads. Her hair was brown, short with bangs, her eyes blue and bright. Her skin was light. She had trouble tanning without burning, but there wasn't a mark on her. That's weird.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
She has no freckles or anything?
She was slight with nice legs, delicate hands, and a relatively small chest. She had a way of giggling that made her sound like a 6-year-old.
No thanks.
Didn't this happen in another book?
Yes. Why is that? Like, that is such a turnoff, dude. I don't want to hear a child giggling with my like significant other.
Compare a grown teenager.
I hate it so much.
To a child. Yeah. No, thank you.
And I think she's 18, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, not adult. Don't compare an adult to a child at that point.
Yeah, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond the fact that Sheila is dealing with this terrible breakup mooniness, what do we think about her?
I like her. She's brave and she follows her gut and she doesn't question it, which I think is a really great ability to have, especially as a younger human being. Yeah. I don't know. There wasn't. I was so into Dusty in this one that Sheila was a reminder of what Pike books had been in the past, while Dusty was a new type of character for her.
That's very true. Yeah, because Sheila is a very typical Pike heroine.
Right, yeah. And that's kind of how I felt about her, and I always like the Pike heroines. I always do. But I was more excited by Dusty, so unfortunately I don't have that much to say about her, but I did like her. I thought that she was very smart. I thought that she always was trying to do what was right. I thought that she trusted her gut. And, you know, I mean, other than my own personal issue with her mooning, other than that, I thought she was a very strong Pike heroine.
And in her confrontation toward the end with Dusty, she's also very clever in how she plays him, even though she has to resort to slut shaming to do it.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
But she is clever and gets him to kill himself. So, you know, there's that. Spoilers. Moving on to good guy cop, Lieutenant Black. He was approximately 35, with a head of full brown hair, blue eyes, and a tan, chiseled jaw. He, in fact, resembled a handsome TV cop, and for some reason that reassured Sheila that they had a real hero here to help them. She's totally into him.
Well, as a TV cop, I mean, back in the days when TV cops were sex symbols, the days of Chips or like, you know,
so pre-NYPD Blue, really.
Exactly.
I was picturing like SVU's Detective Munch.
Yeah.
Or if it was like Stabler, I could see Stabler.
I feel like Stabler's more. Well, no, I didn't want him to be like an attractive. I just wanted him to be like a grumpy old like cop, you know, just like this mean faced little guy who's always talking about conspiracy theories and stuff.
So do we have much to say about Lieutenant Black other than he's pretty much stock
he's
cop?
Super irresponsible.
Yeah, he needs to be retrained. He needs to go back to the drawing board with how he approaches things if he's going to deal with teenagers. He invites her to his home.
That's what I was going to say, with his daughter, and sends Dusty to the kitchen to deal with his like teenage kid. What are you doing?
It's really upsetting that he invited her. Like, I'm going to be home soon. Do you want to come over?
Yeah, no.
It's like,
why not just go to the office?
What? No.
Station, office, whatever.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's really weird. Otherwise, I think he was perfectly fine character. He obviously didn't have a huge amount to do in this one. There wasn't a ridiculously long interrogation scene. Right. So, you know, that's a positive. And mostly, you know, a lot of these cop characters, if they're not the ones saving the day, they're just sort of following along. You know, so he shows up after things. Yeah. You know, and this is another book that feels like it could have been a longer, bigger book. It could have been an adult Pike book.
Oh, 100%, especially with all the backstory that we get to at one point, but it all is like bloop into one ball. Yeah, I agree.
Because like Captain Gary Gossick is introduced in the back half of the book and then spends like a chapter
more than that
talking about his history that could have been expanded. There's nothing bad here. It all just could have been expanded.
Yeah, the story that he tells, like all the detail and the information, everything is great. It's just like I was like, holy shit! Talk about a monologuer. It was just like this brick in the last half of the book. But I think probably he needed to meet deadline, and that's how he could get the backstory in, would be my guess. Yeah,
exactly. Let's talk about again here. Thank you for all the shame, ladies. Mother shame. Dusty's mom 50-year-old widow, a victim of fate that had snatched away her husband when Dusty was only 9 years old and then taken her mind a few months later. Dusty's mom is in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's and is being looked after by Miss Hilda Garcia, whose English is as poor as her cooking. It's interesting because they feel pointless for most of the book. And that is sort of like a red flag in Pike. It's just like, okay, so it's an absentee parent that's not actually absent. Mm-hmm. And that's notable.
Yeah, they put, little hints, or he puts little hints here and there for both of them. But yeah, Mrs. Shame, I mean, there wasn't much that she would be able to do due to her advanced Alzheimer's. But I thought that while it was a really interesting choice to have that be the reason for her to be able to be a shell to this Scheimer woman, or was really interesting, because I don't know if you guys have been around people with advanced Alzheimer's, but the way he's described it, I mean, not everybody is like that, but like there is kind of this like, just my grandmother had Alzheimer's and dementia. And there is this like kind of weird in between of like worlds that sometimes she would slip into, and she would hear and see things that weren't, there. And we're like, well, where is she seeing? Like, where is she coming from? A different, like, I don't know how that all works. But I thought it was a really interesting choice to make, to move the plot forward with what he wanted, with the story that he wanted to tell. But it was also really just kind of sad and disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was mostly sad too, because I didn't really think it was pointless. I thought it was like, it spoke to Dusty more. Like, he doesn't have any friends, and then like the only people at his home, like how they mentioned, he can't like effectively communicate with either of them. And his own mother is like, my mom has Alzheimer's, so she got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when I was younger. So it's just been progressively getting worse. And I don't actually talk to her anymore, but they're not related to that, just other stuff. But she, I've seen her have moments where it's really hard, or like she will forget things that she should know, and she gets angry like at you about it. And so like this was a different way too, because it was like this was so far, like, and since I don't talk to my mom now, it kind of was a little bit more emotional for me, because I was like, wow, is this like what's going to happen like with my mother, like, and I'm not there, like, and she has other people with her and stuff, so it's not, I'm not trying to turn this into a guilt fest for me, but I did think it was something that kind of made him, it isolates him, because not a lot of kids are dealing with that. And even if they are like him, they're not talking about it at school with other people.
Right.
That was just another thing that made him alone, and that kept him apart from everybody else around him.
No, that's very true.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and also I think it kind of speaks to what we were saying earlier before as well about Dusty, and how, he's kind of like this misunderstood sad boy. I think it was also really smart of Pike to write him as weirdly caring for his mother as he was. It was still there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
right.
And I think that kind of is part of what endeared readers to him also in an odd way. And same with,
no, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I would say kind of probably same thing with Mrs. Garcia as well. But I did, it was kind of interesting that it was just like the two or three things here or there where like Mrs. Garcia would just like look at Dusty and be terrified. Like I saw that as being kind of like comical and like cartoonish in a certain way, But anyway, yeah.
It's like they had to overwhelmingly point out that she was very much paying attention to what he was doing.
Right, exactly.
I feel like he really lacks subtlety with this book, because like if you go back and read it, so I knew this reading that the mother was like the vehicle or whatever for what was happening, because I remembered that from being younger. And there was some stuff that I wasn't clear on. So when I was reading it this time, I noticed that every time he is talking about the voice, they mention the mother immediately after. Like when he's in the cave, when he's like talking about thinking like the voice is gone, and then he's like, then he thinks back to his mother. Why did I think of her like that? Like I was like, that's not subtle, Christopher Pike. Like what the heck? But it's not my first read, so I wanted to know if that was.
I didn't pick up on that.
Oh,
I did.
You did?
But it also isn't my first read either.
Okay,
No.
so that's fair. Becca?
I mean,
Oh no, I didn't.
Okay.
and I
figured it
did
out later
pick up
when I read away.
pretty early that the mother, I mean, once we started talking about the Nazis,
Mhm.
I picked up that this was a descendant. You know, once they said a mother with her child, I wrote Dusty's mother in there. So I like that I got. The voice thing, I think it's because I wasn't clear how he was hearing the voice. And I've read enough serial killer fiction that the voice is omnipresent. And so I guess I just assumed he was hearing it all the time.
And not
like
just when
at
he was at
school.
home. Yeah.
So it couldn't
yeah.
have possibly been his mother talking because he was hearing it there. But then when it became, then it was like, okay, does that jive with what I've read though? Like,
That's
did he
interesting.
only hear it when at home around his mother?
I think because in the book, I don't think we even really experience him hearing it, do we?
We don't.
Or is it,
No,
we
that's
just get
true.
told that he heard it. So,
Right.
yeah, because then we find out that that she was telling him the whole time, like, don't open your eyes and blah, blah, blah. And like, well, I'll eat your eyes. And it's like, holy shit. Like, what else was she telling you? This is horrifying. Like, if this were, I know you can't make this because it does have like a little bit of a supernatural like element, but if this were real life, can you imagine like a horror movie? Like, did you guys see Relic or something? Like, just where like the older mother figure is not well. And it's just like, this is so sad and fucking creepy. Like, I love this book. It's so
Yeah.
weird.
It is.
It's there's a lot of darkness here.
Well, and since I read this with all of that kind of mysticism and like empath Claire stuff, I assumed it was clairaudience, where like you have it's like a psychic ability to hear something that's not present. But it's not. It doesn't happen all the time. You know, you might hear something when you're in between. Like I have had the experience of in like those waking moments. You know what I mean? When you're not quite awake and you're not quite asleep. I've had some clairaudience issues where I'm like, I can hear. I don't want to sound like I'm a crazy witch person, but kind of like thoughts or whatever of other people, and I actually freaked out about it and had to go. The whole long story about that. But I thought I was like losing my mind and becoming schizophrenic. Not the case. But I have a little bit of clairaudience. So that was something that I assumed was going on with Dusty because, again, as I said, even though he's a mass murderer as a teenager, I did relate to him because of those empath abilities and the clairaudient abilities, which is how I took this reading personally. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I love that there's such different ways, like just, and I know that that's the case with all books and that's the point of reading and everything, but it's just when we do these podcasts and I'm like, I like didn't even consider that. It's so cool. I love it.
Well, and that may be the case with all books, but honestly, most of Pike's are fairly straightforward. This may be the most unique readings of any Pike book because we all have got very different things out of it.
That's
so
true.
it's very interesting in that way.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to a richness of story.
Agreed. Yeah, I would think so too.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Dixie Black. Her silvery blue eyes were practically the same color as her braces. Her shorts smaller than her daddy would have liked. This poor blonde teenager is creepily sexualized in her introduction, and then that creepy sexualization is used to slut shame her later.
Yeah, she was kind of like a caricature for me of like, early to mid 90s, like a baby Cindy Crawford or something. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I pictured her.
It made me think of there was a Pike book where at the end a teenage girl moved in next door and she was all poppy and like Lolita sexy. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't remember which book it was because I could have sworn her name was Dixie too. Well, listeners, if you know what this was, please tell us.
Like,
this is going to bother me forever, Cooper. I need you to figure this out.
Yeah.
Did you talk about Lolita in the episode?
I don't know, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really? She reminded me, she was very Babysitter's Club to me, like especially when she was in the car talking too much. Like I was like, oh, this is a Babysitter's Club book. And then she gets...
No, it did make me very uncomfortable that he just kidnapped a young girl. and was driving her away.
That was the
What
first...
is that short story with Arnold Friend? It's like an older short story, and it's about a young girl who like gets a phone call from this guy, and he shows up at her house and her parents aren't home. I thought about that while I was reading the book, and because I was in the middle of reading, I didn't want to stop and look it up, and then I forgot. But it gave me those vibes where it's like these young girls, like they know they should be in danger, but it's so put on them by society to be polite and to be nice and just go with things, so that she goes with them even when she's uncomfortable in the car and they've gone too far and she knows that they've gone too far. She lets it happen for a bit because she knows, or like she feels like she needs to be subservient to him and like just agreeable. And I thought that was very interesting considering how much of a filler character she was, because that was like, it was nailed. Like that was really well done.
I thought Dixie was a cutie.
Where are you going? Where have you been? That's what it's called.
Where are you going? Where have you been?
It's by Joyce Carol Oates.
Okay.
I would highly recommend it. It's really, really good. It's a short story. You could probably find it online, like somewhere on like a literature like website for schools or something. Like it's probably just free online.
Well, I was going to say too that as far as Dixie is concerned, I think she was well used as a tool for the story, but not necessarily as a character. But this was also the first time that we see Dusty being an asshole.
That's very true. Very true.
So I thought that was kind of actually important because in order to get to where we ended, he had to get there. So she was the thing to kind of take him to that moment.
And it's his mask falling too.
Exactly.
You know, that's it's as the artifice of the serial killer's real life unravels.
Right.
We're seeing the monster.
Yeah, and so I know I said he wasn't a monster, but this is my but here, is I want to point out that here, when we see him be mean, but not just here, but he's also manipulated her into going with him. And not just that, but he manipulates the other girl who walks in on him murdering the other person.
Yes.
He manipulates her because he knows. So this is where the part for me, where the autistic thing, like the spectrum for me was a little bit harder, because like, it's like he's like, oh, I don't understand and I don't relate and I don't get along with people, but he knows what to do and what to make them do, you know, like how to get them to react a certain way. And I thought that was very like jarring for me, because I was reading that and I was like, whoa, like, hang on, I think he knows a little bit more than he's letting on here.
All right, moving on to our last character, Captain Gary Gossick. Now, we are going to discuss Captain Gossick's story in the plot section.
Okay.
So I want to just talk about him as a character here. I mean, he's cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
but he really is last minute. You know, like last minute game changer, Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. Yeah. It feels like, honestly, they could have somehow combined Lieutenant Black and Gary Gossick somehow. But I mean, he's cool in that he relays this long story, but because of that, like when we talk about how this could have been expanded, I would have liked to see chapters of Captain Gary Gossick going through this historical stuff. You know, that is worth exploring for many chapters, but obviously you can't do that. And this is one of Pike's longest books we've read, something like 230 pages.
Yeah.
And usually they're right around 200. So we're already well above the normal length for these books. But I like how quickly he jumps in and is like, okay, no, we're doing this. I'm going to help you. He doesn't need to be convinced at all. And as much as I was reading this as literal and not mystical, when he has Sheila like tune out, and just experience and not ask, not ask the universe for something, just be receiving.
Yep.
That was very interesting, and it made for a cool story, I thought.
Yeah, Gossick was interesting to me because I think I agree with you. I think he is a character that could be developed more, and I think he's a character that could have been sprinkled throughout the book a little bit more, so that when we did get to his big kind of plot area that we'll talk about later, it was a little bit more kind of inundated within the rest of the story. But that being said, he has the ability to be something really cool. But and as far as like the being a kind of like receiver, that to me it was similar to, I think he was also talking about Dusty to a certain degree as well. At least in my read of it, he was talking about Dusty to a certain degree as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. So he brought not only the plot to the forefront, but also the to me, it kind of was a loop back to the beginning when Dusty was talking about all that stuff that bothered him about noise and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I liked him. I liked the concept.
Well, let's move on to Remember Me and start with our plot discussion. Obviously, as always, we've discussed a lot of the plot already, but we have 4 women who are dead at the beginning. No, 3 women who are dead at the beginning, right?
Yeah, Nancy and then the 2 in the house, right? I think that was it.
Yes. Nancy was the 3rd.
Oh, Nancy's right. Okay, so Stacy and Deborah are dead before the book opens. So I just watched Fear Street 1994. And it's a very enjoyable film. But one of the characters is using AOL chat rooms. And that's not 1994.
I was going to say, I kept hearing, I haven't watched it yet because I keep hearing people talk about how the timeline is all wrong.
I mean, here's the thing. It's okay. It doesn't matter. It only matters if you were there, really.
Sure.
But it's a lot more like, you know how The Wedding Singer takes place in the 80s?
Right, yes.
Where literally every 80s thing is happening at the same time?
Yeah.
That's what 1994 feels like.
Okay.
Because this is what the internet was in 93 and 94.
Yes.
Einstein is basically Prodigy, which was an AOL competitor at the time. And it's not the internet. The internet wasn't a thing. You went on to this service. That was what you were doing. And the service was a collection of chat rooms and usually emails, which were more like direct messages back then. But I found it really interesting that it was so developed, this thing, because Pike just got on Prodigy. Like, he probably got on Prodigy in 91, 92 and was so excited by the technology that he really wanted to add that into a story.
So just to go back a little bit, because a lot of people have been saying that, but it didn't look that way, but they did have chat rooms and stuff. AOL existed before it was officially called AOL since the late 80s, and they had chat rooms. They just didn't have AIM, which was the instant messenger itself, like as a standalone until 97. So he could have been in a chat room. Like, that could have been happening. It just would have looked a little bit different, and it wouldn't have shown somebody's typing.
Also, he can't steal the internet from...
No, and that's fair too, but I have a lot of love for these nostalgic things, and when people rip it online without being correct, it makes me a little bit prickly about it. And so I just wanted to be clear for anybody listening, that is a small little thing, but it didn't look like that. That's fair. But he could have totally been online chatting at that time in that year online
absolutely.
For AOL. It was just called something different until 91 or something.
Yeah, it would have looked a lot different, though. That's, as someone who was there, that's all that matters.
Yes. Same.
While we're on the subject of Fear Street, I just wanted to give a little shout out to Katie, who is the Haunted Outfit on Instagram. She does really good artwork for these books. I was talking to her the other day, and she had mentioned, I think her name is Kate as well, the cheerleader from Fear Street. You guys know who I'm talking about? Is that her name, Kate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and she said, isn't she a sugar sister? And I just wanted to bring that up.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yes.
I love her so much.
Totally.
I got really excited about that because I was like, I didn't think about it while I was watching the movie, but damn, bro. Damn. Anyways, I wanted to mention the sugar sister because I love them.
and I'm not degrading Fear Street movies. I'm really impressed with the sheer, they took R.L. Stine's not so adult work
Mm-hmm.
and they made it very adult. And I'm very impressed with that. And I can't wait to see what they do with Pike because of that.
Yes,
I'm
same.
excited.
This is like what I've been waiting for years. Like everybody's like, oh, new Halloween, new Freddy. I'm like, bring back the 90s horror paperbacks in movie form, please.
It's
I'm
what we
so excited.
deserve.
Seriously, part 2, the 1978, that is a fantastic slasher movie.
I'm so excited. I've only seen the first one so
Oh
far.
my God. That
It is good.
I love that so much.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, really, my only issues with 94 is timeline stuff, because I'm very particular. If you're going to set it at a specific time, just look at what's available in that time.
That's my thing. Like 94 for me was like maybe the most special year of my life. And I was 14 and there's such a special place in my heart that like, if they don't get that year right, I'm afraid I'm going to hate everything. So like, that's why I haven't watched it yet, but I am excited to check out I'll watch it and I'm excited to check out the other ones, but I'm really, really happy. Like the Midnight Club is being done. Like it's in really good hands.
Yeah,
like Flanagan,
totally.
Like, that's going to be, at least I really hope that's going to be fantastic. Yeah.
I have faith in that.
I do too.
Honestly, I'm going to be there. Look, if I don't like it fully, I'm just going to be like, yes, more, please. This is great. Give me more. Like, that's what I did when they started remaking the old Resident Evil games, because I really want Code Veronica. That's what I'm going to do for this. It's just, I'm so here for it. I'm so excited.
Okay, let's get back to our plot.
I don't even remember where we were talking about.
Well, I immediately moved us into a discussion of the internet.
Okay.
So our serial killer has been finding people on a chat server, which is probably at this point in books a very unique way for a serial killer to find their victims. So I really like that, because you know that he was doing his thing where he hears about something and immediately jumps on it, because that's a thing Pike does a lot. And he really nailed it here, I think.
Oh, I agree. I thought, and it was nice too, just because it took me back to like, not everybody had a computer, like a detective that doesn't have a computer at home.
Right.
Like that's a very of the time moment. And so
and a detective who doesn't have a computer at home, not recognizing the importance of seeing a computer in the rooms of these other people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because at that point they didn't know, you know what I mean? So
right.
I thought it was well done.
Because if you weren't online, you didn't really think about online. It wasn't omnipresent.
Oh, the simple days. It was so nice.
Yeah.
I think that explained it really well too, his reliance on her, and like because she's a young teenager, so she knows more about like what's going on, like these hip happenings, whereas he's just like this like older guy, like what? The internet?
Right.
What messaging?
What for is this thing?
Or
he's like, did she have a computer? I don't know. Was that a calculator? I don't. It's so weird to read now in this current time.
I don't know if anybody here is a Kevin Smith fan, but I was just in my head like Jay from Jay and Silent Bob going like, what the fuck is the internet?
Right. Yeah. The internet has grown so amazingly in such a short amount of time. We really, with as reliant as we are on it, it's unbelievable how short it's actually been around.
Yeah, it's true. I was in high school, and I mean, I didn't have.
Yeah.
I think my first chat room I ever entered, speaking of Kevin Smith, was the View Askew universe, and that was in like 96, maybe? Yeah.
Right.
So it's not been that long, guys. Yeah. I'm not that old, damn it. Yeah.
See, I was dialing into the local chat room chat systems way back, and bulletin boards, and so I was there at the dawn.
Yeah.
There was this TV show for kids called Zoom On, and they had a Zoom chat room website, and that's what I used. My dad came in. He's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm talking to people." I remember the very first time I ever talked to my aunt. Yeah, like my aunt lived in Argentina, and my dad, he calls me into the room one time, and he's like, Cassie, come here. And I'm like, "What?" And I come in, and he has like this little box open on his computer, and he's like, "This is your Aunt Jacqueline," and I was like, "What?" He's like, "This is your aunt." And she's just like, "Hi, Cassie." And I was like, "Can she see me? How is she in there?" Like, my mind was literally blown. I remember it so vividly. Like, and I was like, "This is amazing." And now cut to here where I'm just like texting and messaging, and the only people I ever speak to besides my boyfriend are on the internet. Yeah. It's wild.
It is. I want to shout out real quick. I want to talk about Nancy Bardella's father, because this is something we've seen a few times in Pike's work, where it's the broken man, the broken father of a dead daughter. Mr. Bardella was a strong man ordinarily. Now, though, he looked like a house that lost its foundation and collapsed in upon itself.
That's actually quite beautiful.
Really it's so well encapsulated a point of view of a person here.
Cooper, it's really cute of you that you wanted to shout him out.
I want to shout him out.
He's just like this poor sad guy.
Sad
we need to
father. Yeah.
We need to pay attention to this dad, guys. Come on, he's really sad.
He's really sad.
I love it. No, I know it is precious. He was really sad too. It was because when you think about it, like we're just reading these books and we're just like, wow, fun killing Hammer. But then like when you do think about it, like just in the context of if this were real world, like there are so many families that are being destroyed by this guy.
Absolutely
like,
destroyed.
It's sad.
It is. Yes.
Now we're going to move on to Wendy Bart, whose favorite thing in the world is Stephen King, which is adorable. But I have to take issue with something here. You know the Jim Gardner character in the Tommyknockers? He sounded so genuine. King must have been drunk more than a few times in his life. So King does not remember writing the Tommyknockers because he was out of his mind on coke.
Oh.
And the Tommyknockers actually reads as though someone is out of his mind on coke. Because, I mean, that fucking book doesn't make any sense. And I don't care who likes it or doesn't like it. You cannot tell me that book makes sense.
I mean, have you read some of these Pike books, though? Like, I feel like that it's very
Never once have I felt like Pike didn't know what he was writing.
I just feel like maybe he appreciates that sort of chaos.
Oh,
like,
that could be.
Yeah.
I think it's very quaint that the characters are talking about, you know, maybe King gets drunk every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like, no. High off his ass on cocaine.
I loved that line, just because like this is kind of a side note, but I promise I'll bring it back around. But in a screenplay that I'm working on, a pilot that I'm working on, I have one of my characters make a reference to the Carrie, the novel, and the screenplay takes place in 1997. And one of my friends read it to give me notes, and he's younger, he's 29, and he was like, it just seems to me that this girl would just randomly know that like there was a reference to a Stephen King book by just saying the name Carrie. And I was like, you were not alive in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
Everybody knew that Stephen
Everybody
King
was very aware of Carrie.
It doesn't matter who you were. You knew that Carrie was Stephen King. And I was like, so it was like two days after I got that note that I read that in the Christopher Pike book. And I was like, see, everybody knows. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at it as there wasn't immediate access to all this media that there is now. Yeah. So media touchstones were far more important in the 90s because you knew what other people had talked about. You knew what the kids at school were talking about. You didn't know other things.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting reflecting on that. And Toni, you and I are very close to the same age, if not the same age.
Yeah.
So it is really interesting seeing that kind of thing pop up for sure.
It is. I just wonder if it gets lost to new readers or viewers. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I do want to mention that Pike's fascination with the rock group U2 makes a reappearance in this book. When Dusty is talking about what you might find to chat about under music, there might be a place to talk about the rock group U2. I thought that was a lovely,
just a
lovely Pike return there.
Yeah, there was a nice little nod.
Okay, moving on. Let's address the elephant in the room: Nazis.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, like, I think about this a lot. The Nazis, if you look at where they were as villains in the 80s and 90s versus what they are as villains today, it's a really disturbing but interesting shift in how they're seen. You know, like, in fact, so there's that Rick and Morty episode where the Nazis like, I'm comfortable being called a Nazi. You think you can say anything else that'll hurt my feelings? And that is out of date.
Yeah.
Because we have legitimate Nazis running around again. So, politics and such. But this would have been unique back then. The Nazi thing wasn't pulled. The Nazi thread wasn't pulled as often.
Right.
And so I kind of felt two things here. Like I liked what they were doing, but at the same time, it did make me uncomfortable that they were ultimately blaming this on past monsters rather than his fault. Because then he's just a vessel. And I like it better when he's being influenced, but isn't a vessel for it.
Oh, because you mean he can avoid responsibility?
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of it was Nazis all along,
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know. What do you all think about that?
It's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I'll be honest with you. I was just completely taken aback because, as I've said, this was one of my favorites as a kid, and I've read it more than once, and I totally forgot that there was a Nazi subplot. Like, I really did. And so when I started reading it again, I was like, I texted my friend. I was like, Nazis? I was like, where did Nazis come from? How do I not remember this?
It was hashtag suddenly Nazis.
Suddenly not, yes. But I think it's what you say is interesting because, yes, at that time, when you thought about Nazis, you thought about the past, you thought about history, you thought about, you weren't seeing, Klan members on the evening news. You weren't seeing, burning crosses and people being run over. So, like, it was a very different time, obviously. So I think there was a much, not to say that that stuff didn't exist. It just wasn't in the eye of the media of us.
We at that point thought it was gone.
Right.
That's the thing.
But it was bubbling and growing underneath the surface. Yeah. But so
like a monster of some sort.
Exactly. So I do kind of agree with you as far as like in today's world to not have this character take responsibility does make me uncomfortable. 100%. I can understand why it was written the way it was in 93.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But I think it's one of the reasons why this book, even if I didn't understand all of the history at the time when I read it, I think it's one of the reasons this book was always one of the most scary to me is because something about it felt real. Something about it felt truthful. Something about it felt honest. And that was the part that was, for me, like I can watch slasher and read slasher stuff all day. But when you get into things that feel real and grounded, like... I mean, as grounded as they can be, but if you're being controlled by Nazi ghosts,
Well, I mean, and I feel that very much too, because so I did a little bit of a dive here. Mm-hmm. So Himmler is real.
Yep. Yeah, I did this.
We know that. Mm-hmm. Scheimer is not. Mm-hmm. Himmler was married since the 1920s, and he did have an affair with his secretary, Hedwig Potthast. Mm-hmm. And she had kids. So there is direct descendants of Himmler, yes. Yeah. But it was interesting because I was wondering that the whole time I was reading. It's like, okay, I know Himmler was real. Is this real?
Yeah, I did.
Is he giving us real history?
Yeah.
Because that's fascinating, right? But at the same time, then it's a weird dichotomy because obviously the Nazis deserve literally every amount of shit thrown upon them.
Yeah.
But to utilize them in fiction is weird.
Yeah, I would agree. And I was trying to figure out, I did the same Google because I was like, I recognize the name Himmler just from like, watching like Tarantino movies. And Strasser, I think, was real as well. But it seemed as though there's like portions of the real story that he kind of intertwined with portions of fictional narrative to create this insane backstory that we have. Because I even Googled Rabbi Levitz at one point. I was like,
sure, yeah.
Was he real? So yeah, I thought it was an interesting way to, and Pike does a lot of research.
Yeah.
Which you've got to give credit for.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it was a little uncomfortable, but I think it was uncomfortable for a good enough reason, at least for me.
When we, the thing about it is, I don't know how exactly to explain this. Nazis used to be scary.
Yeah.
They didn't used to be part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're obviously still scary, but they're more infuriating now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were things, especially as a child, before I was well aware of the actual the atrocities that were happening alongside the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know about the genocide,
mm-hmm.
but some of the atrocities are utterly horrifying. The skin lampshade is a thing,
right? Yeah.
So it was. I mean, if I had read this in '94, this would have been really, really dark. This feels like Apt Pupil.
Oh, that was, I forgot about that movie.
And so it's dark, it's upsetting, and it's full-fledged Nazis.
Yeah, that's the first note I wrote down that I'm looking at right now. Is just like something about this one just felt, all caps, dark. Like it was just really dark. Yeah.
So this is the story of Gary Gossick, where he was in the war and he learned a lot about Himmler and Scheimer, and that they were empty shells. Now, this is also a problem I have.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I like the idea of Himmler and Scheimer being so evil that they transcend and live on. I like that. I don't like the idea that something is controlling them, something base and different. Because if they're empty shells, that means there's something within them that's making them do these Nazi atrocities. And that makes me uncomfortable. Because I feel like that is also, in a weird way, an apology.
100%. Yeah, it's escaping responsibility yet again.
Yeah.
100%.
Because I'm sticking with Dusty Shame is a monster. He's a monster who's being influenced, yes, but he is a monster. Or he would have shot himself at the beginning.
No, I agree. I think Dusty is a monster. I think he was just a very well written monster.
100%. Yeah. But so Himmler and Scheimer are essentially being they're called out here. They were like psychic vampires because they close their eyes and soak up the nourishment of the horrors of the torture. And that's interesting because the Nazis are well known to have been after occult things, and man, it's hard to talk about Nazis.
It is. I was going to say, are Cassie and Becca still here? Where are you guys?
Hi, I'm right here.
I was like, you haven't said anything for so long.
No, you guys keep going.
It's just a lot of Nazis.
It is. I mean, so I feel like I'm not articulating my thoughts well. So I'm going to ask Cassie and Becca.
Yes.
How did you feel about this direction that the book went?
That's probably the only thing in this book where I was kind of like, are we kidding here? It was, I don't know, that was about it. Like, I mean, I felt like it worked okay. Like, it was fine. Like, I still really like this book. But that was the one part that kind of made me like, why did he include Nazis as the I guess the reason behind everything. Mm-hmm. So that was it. I mean, it was okay. I'm okay with the Nazis. I mean, I'm not okay with the Nazis.
That was out of context. Probably not the best quote ever.
No, I do not like Nazis.
Yeah. And this is why it's so difficult to talk about Nazis as a plot point, and that's why it's so difficult to use Nazis as a plot point.
Yeah.
Is because you have to figure out how you're identifying these as characters and not just... I mean, because it's easy to make Nazis unambiguously awful beings, right?
Of course, yeah.
But an unambiguously awful bad guy is not interesting ultimately. And so that is what makes Dusty interesting, is he is fighting against being the monster.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Dusty has a great internal struggle. I think that's why he's, I mean, it's gonna sound interesting or maybe like weird to say, especially coming from a Black woman as well. But like Dusty is one of my favorite characters in Pike books because I feel like I'm also a writer, and I think that has a lot to do with it. So I'm looking at it from how he's written, and I think he is maybe one of the best written characters for a Pike book, because I think that in order to find any sort of empathy for this character when he's being controlled by Nazis, do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to write him super carefully in order to make him not a completely hated character off the jump, especially the lead character, you know? So from the perspective of a writer, I appreciate Dusty. From the perspective of reading this book and probably, honestly, I was probably introduced to Nazis from this book, which is why I didn't quite remember it. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, I don't think I really understood. Because I had led a pretty sheltered childhood. But yeah, it's hard to talk about, but also like it's 2021. Look at the world we're living in now. We should be able to talk about what a 1993 book about Nazi poster. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not fun, but it's it's the plot of, you know, Indiana Jones. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Adding to the fact that like it is 2021, I was kind of like, while enjoying this book, like wondering to myself, like, is it okay for me to like a book where there's like Nazis as a subplot?
Yeah, that's
like,
yes, it is okay.
I kept questioning myself. I'm like, this book is like probably my favorite one so far, and I'm like, but it's weird because there are Nazis and Nazis are fucked up. That was me saving myself from the last comment. What I really meant was Nazis.
Why don't we do this? Okay,
yeah,
go
tell
ahead.
me about it.
No, I think that it's, so I have conflicting thoughts, because on the one hand, I think that this story could have stood alone if it had a different setup and it had just been, it wasn't Nazis, but some sort of evil maybe that Gossick had encountered when he was working, you know, like his past could be the same. He's like, I encountered these awful people. I don't know that that Pike had to tie this into Nazis, but I will say that, like Toni, this wasn't my first brush, because I think I read the Diary of Anne Frank before I read this, but this was the first time that I read about Nazis in normal fiction, like teen books like this, like in a thriller horror book. And I don't know what this says about me, but it made it more like, I don't want to say more horrifying, because when I read the Diary of Anne Frank and when we watched movies and stuff, we watched Schindler's List and thing, and it just, that was all horrifying. But then when I was like, these are teens like being affected by this, and then it, for some reason, like as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I was like, oh my God, like there were teens, like, and that, I don't know why, but like, and I know, like I said, I read Anne Frank's diary, like I knew there were children and teens, but it's just, for some reason, it wasn't until it was in something that was like modernized in my fun time of reading that I was like, holy shit. So I think while I don't know if it was like the best choice, and while I completely understand what you're saying about the responsibility and stuff, I do think it's important that we put topics like these sorts of heavy topics in modern literature and in kids books and teens books. I mean, obviously there's probably a age range that they'd want to shoot for, but a lot of kids will relate to things and understand them more if you give that to them in a place that's, they're already looking. You know? So I think like Toni, like you said, you read this and you're like, wow, like this was a little, you didn't remember it obviously, but at the time I'm sure you were probably like, oh shit, like what the heck is that stuff about? And otherwise, you know, people might not have that experience. So I'm kind of conflicted, because I kind of think it's like he could have done something else, but also I'm kind of like, I'm glad he put this in the book, but also I'm like,
right.
It has to be Nazi.
Well,
that's exactly how I feel about it.
I just don't think that we should shy away from these types of topics in narrative, though, because if we keep shying away from these topics, whether it's in narrative, whether it's in discussion, whether it's in storytelling, whatever, they're going to disappear. And once they disappear, people are going to act like they didn't happen. So like,
well, I wonder this. So Spielberg, after making Schindler's List, said he was uncomfortable using Nazis as stock villains, and he wouldn't do it again. And I wonder how many creators became uncomfortable using Nazis as stock villains after Schindler's List, because Schindler's List showed the very, very real horrors. And that's the thing. You especially as a young person, you have this objective idea of the Holocaust as an event. And you know that a lot of people died. But you also sort of gloss over it as the past.
oh yeah.
And you gloss over it as something that is not as relevant to you. And so, Cassie, what you were saying really stuck out to me, because this brought home the horrors of a ultimately incredibly, unbelievably horrific thing to you. And I think when we don't see the true horror, when we don't understand it's oh my, this is hard. It's difficult to believe how horrifying Nazi Germany was. It's difficult to understand how unbelievably torturous and monstrous the situations were. We don't even have a barometer as people really to understand that type of horror. And so whatever it is, as you were saying, Toni, whatever it is that brings it home to us is incredibly valuable. And I wonder if the fact that fiction, so this is 93, Schindler's List was 93. So this is theoretically at least written pre-Schindler's List.
Right.
I wonder if the lack of Nazi appearance in fiction has sort of removed some of the horror from the world and has ultimately allowed for Nazism to become mainstream again.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm taking your point, Cooper, because I think that part of the reason that it's so hard, I think had we had this podcast 10 years ago and talked about this, it wouldn't be so hard to talk about this right now.
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
It's hard to talk about it now because this has been brought back into our lives and brought back into our world. So as you were saying, we don't have the ability to kind of understand how bad it was. But I think out of all the generations since then, we have the best idea of what it might be, because now we're starting to see it again, granted at a much smaller scale, but at least we're seeing what the true kind of hate and evil looks like and feels like and sounds like. And having all of that in our lives again now is why it's so difficult to talk about this from the 90s. Yeah. Had we talked about this in 2001, we would probably be laughing. But, had we talked about this in 2015? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we cannot overemphasize how changed the world was in those 4 years there.
Yeah.
And that makes it, that's outside the purview of this podcast. So we're going to take a quick break. And regroup. We're going to take a quick break and regroup. We'll be back with more of the PikeCast. Wow, friends. Where else can you get this kind of programming than the PikeCast? Nowhere. That's where.
but we're trying to keep the lights on here. If you like what you're hearing and want it to keep happening, jump over to our Patreon at thepikecast.com/Patreon and throw us a few bucks to join our private Discord server. Higher tiers get books, stickers, bookmarks, and even personalized shirts. That's thepikecast.com/Patreon.
Once, Osgood and Frost were the up-and-coming stars of the burgeoning paranormal investigation TV show craze before a hoax put an end to their friendship, partnership, and television careers. Now, over a decade later, Prudence Osgood is a barely functioning alcoholic ghost hunter for hire. Her yearning for mystery and adventure is reignited when she receives a cryptic, untraceable email. She can't resist embarking on an investigation that tugs threads, winding through a sinister series of disappearances, her former partner's family, and a night 20 years ago when a semi blew a yellow light and nearly killed her. Reviewers are calling Osgood Is Gone a masterfully vulnerable and relatable 21st century horror story, and a bourbon-soaked supernatural mystery with sparkling dialogue that sticks the landing on LGBT characters, and main character Prudence Osgood, as tortured as she is clever, broken in all the best ways, and a true heroine for our times. Buy it today at Osgood Is Gone as a paperback, ebook, or audiobook narrated by me, JJ Ronvier.
Welcome back to the PikeCast. We are making a concentrative effort to not be as philosophical on the subject of Nazis, but Cassie has a thought.
I do. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, this is the eternal enemy section. So really, Nazism is the eternal enemy.
It is. Okay. So speaking to that, I don't know if this goes with what you were saying about the personal or just general responsibility thing, but I do think that I like it less that it's just some generalized evil instead of the people themselves. Like,
yeah,
I do wish that because they were making it, like they made up this whole Nazi character that doesn't actually exist in real life. And they, like you said, they kind of take the responsibility away from the fact that these people are and were evil, and as if it's just some entity controlling them and making them evil, where I think that makes it a little bit less realistic and a little bit less scary, which is, I think, part of my problem with the fact that it was Nazis used and not something else.
Sure,
that could have been maybe a metaphor for that. But I think that, I don't want to say cheapens it, but it cheapens it a little bit, because with Dusty, I feel differently, because I'm like, he is a vehicle, he's being manipulated like this. But with the Nazis, I'm like, they weren't being manipulated by some fucking evil. They were evil. Like, that is just what it is. So while I do have a lot more sympathy for him and his mother as well, I think I do wish that the rest of it were handled a little bit in a way that didn't absolve them of everything that they did.
And here's a quote that feels like it's not absolving, I don't think, but it is deferring blame. It's when Gossick shoots Scheimer. She was a non-entity, a lens for a ray of blackness to focus onto our planet. Nothing more. She was not afraid to die because she was not alive. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of there being holes in horrible people, but I don't like the idea of them being filled externally. And I think that's what you're getting at too, Cassie, is that this is changing the blame game. And so it's not actually Scheimer possessing Dusty. It's this other thing. And this other thing that is essentially manifested as a cockroach, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, ultimately that's my only real problem with how the Nazis are used. I was surprised by the Nazi stuff, but I wasn't, put off by it. I don't like giving them an out at all. And I feel like a lens for a ray of blackness to focus on our planet that line gives an out to Himmler, who was one of history's greatest monsters, who existed.
Yeah. Like, and that implies that it's like, oh, and the way that it happens to Dusty, it's like, this could happen to anybody. Like, you could just be afflicted by this evil. And it's like, that's not what happened with the Nazi party. Like, that was very targeted and specific and evil.
Right, and
like,
choices.
And exactly. And so I think that is, again, like you're saying, that's the thing that I think I have the problem with the most. And again, I don't dislike the book for it. And I don't dislike that there are Nazis in the book, but I do wish that had been handled differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move into thirst. There was no titillation to sexuality in this book.
Yeah. There was a long breakup.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a long breakup. There's and nothing. I was shocked.
Poor Cooper for this book.
Nothing. I'm looking for titillation. They give me Nazis.
He's just flipping the pages. Where's the titillation? Where's the titillation?
For fuck's sake. Why is nobody skinny dipping? Can't somebody talk about boobs for a little while?
This girl didn't even describe the length of her legs.
No, she didn't.
They did eat McDonald's.
They did. Twice.
Twice.
Yes. There's two McDonald's references in here. Yeah. So let's jump into Die Softly, where we talk about moralizing and problematic elements in the writing.
Well, shit.
I'm gonna suggest you see our previous segment because, again, it's all in the lens in which you view fictionalized Nazism. Right. Otherwise, the only real problematic thing I found is the way Sheila slut-shames Dixie in order to get Dusty not to pay attention to her. I'm more innocent than this tramp, Sheila said. Didn't you see her in those shorts this afternoon? And her father was right there. Imagine how she dresses when she's out on the town. Imagine how many guys she slept with already. She's not innocent. She's a slut. All cops' daughters are sluts. You're wasting your bullets. Kill me. I'm still a blessed virgin. Like, I get what she's doing, but it's really rough.
It is rough. It is rough. But it worked.
It worked.
It saved her life. I mean, but it was very slut-shaming for sure.
Very slut-shaming.
Yeah.
So slut-shaming and Nazis. That's the problematic elements in this book.
Yes.
So let's move into the season of passage, where we talk about the best and worst writing and Pikeisms. As we mentioned earlier, we've got 2 McDonald's quotes here, because Sheila entices Dusty with a date with her. And what would we do? Go to McDonald's. I don't know. Because the best dates happen at McDonald's. Take your dates to McDonald's, everybody. Then earlier, Sheila Hardholt drove Dusty Shame back toward Chino. Along the way, they stopped at a McDonald's and had a hamburger and fries. There's just something so comforting about the McDonald's in Pike.
It's true, there is. It's just, nice. It's constant.
Yeah.
It's the only thing more comforting would be a nice big cup of milk with that burger.
There was no milk, but Dixie was baking a cake for some reason.
They've got that secret icing somewhere in the cabinet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
emergency icing.
Special emergency chocolate icing. That goes out to our friend Grady Hendricks.
I love all these nods to old episodes we can do now.
You know what that's a sign of? A podcast crawling up its own ass.
I'm here for that.
Well, I was just glad to be. I was on the episode where the milk mouth started.
Mm-hmm.
So full circle. I like it.
Okay, so let's do some quotes. I've got some good quotes. I've got some bad quotes. I've got some weird quotes.
I got some one-liners.
You want to hit us with some one-liners?
Yes,
Becca?
they're fun. Yes. Okay. That very dark night, he had smashed in her skull with his heavy metal hammer, and the irony was he hated Led Zeppelin. That was pretty good to me. And then I have, Snap, crackle, pop. Goodbye, Miss Gray Matter. I got one more. Okay. He figured he was giving off enough weird vibes to give Satan anxiety.
Yeah.
Those are like my favorite one-liners of any Pike book.
The writing is very quirky about Dusty.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's quirky in a way that Pike doesn't often do, and I like that a lot. Yeah.
Agreed.
Does anyone else have quotes?
I don't have any, but I think I had one or two. We talked about them
earlier. We already did. Yeah.
Yeah.
The opening of this book is fantastic.
Yes.
The mind of a killer is an empty thing. The strings of a puppet are filled with mischief.
Yeah, and that's another note I wrote, is that we don't get dialogue until page 22.
Wow.
Nice.
That's
that crazy?
Big thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have, let's see. Tonight would be murder number 3. 3, the one that's supposed to be the charm. But where was the charm for poor Dusty? Where was the reason? Dusty killed so he could rest. It was only when he forever closed the eyes of another that he could close his own eyes and sleep without the dreams and the voice telling him it was time to awaken and continue with the pain.
Yeah.
It's vivid and visceral in a way that Pike isn't often, in fact. He could feel her life as clearly as he would feel that life pass through him as he brought it to an end. Her soul would pass through him, he knew, with the blow to the brain, and in that instant something inside him would sigh, and he would have peace, if only for a little while. Mm-hmm. This one I really enjoy. Her other arm hung over the side of the bed, the hand almost touching the floor, completely afraid of the boogeyman that might lurk under the box springs.
I remember that one. That one was nice. Yeah.
I mean, the murders are so matter of fact. It's really fascinating how it's done here. Like there's very little pageantry to them. They're just, especially with until we get to the girl who wakes up.
Right. Yeah.
And that scene is crazy. Here's the soul leaving. Something, a gust of warm air perhaps, a brush of astral matter maybe, left her body, left her lifeless, and touched him as it passed. He felt the familiar sigh of pleasure inside, the relief it brought, the silence of evil so close to the silence of God.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite. I had that one highlighted as well. That was one of my favorite passages.
And that's one of those passages that makes me think about whether or not he hears the voice without his mother.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
Here we go. Oh, this is good. Dusty, for the second time that day, entered Lieutenant Black's house and took a seat on the white sofa, the one he secretly believed he was capable of staining with his filth. Yeah. And then this is after Dusty shoots himself. It must have been his blood, she realized, his brains, yet it was not sticky or wet, but dry, like dust that had lain undisturbed in a place forgotten by love.
Yeah, the visuals are, I think this might be some of his best writing.
Yeah, I really think so too.
Yeah.
Speaking of best writing, let's talk about some bad stuff. I've got 2 lines that I just hated. Sheila was right. Dusty wanted to dust Dixie.
I actually had that as a line that I loved because it was so dumb.
I mean,
I'm always here for the dumb, okay?
Then here's Matt's possessive nature. His girl with that bastard? Now that she might be in danger, he couldn't stop thinking of her as his. Yeah. Then my last thing I just categorized as weird because I felt like the Star Wars things were a little much in this. I grew up watching Star Wars movies. This is something Yoda might have said. There's a good side of the Force and there's a dark side. Exactly, Gossick said and relieved. I loved those movies. I owned them and watched them over and over until my VCR ate them. maybe sometime we could all get together and watch them again.
Oh, I think I missed that line somehow. I don't remember that.
And then Matt just becomes obsessed with this. I don't agree with all this World War II Star Wars trust in the Force BS. Sheila, you're acting like a nut. And we'll get to her in time. Gossip patted Matt's leg. That's a promise. Matt forced a smile. The promise of a Jedi?
Oh my God.
It's like, fuck you. Fuck you all in the Star Wars bullshit. Come on. Come on. Though I do appreciate that this was before the Star Wars re-release in 97. So that means this was when Star Wars had sort of ebbed out of public consciousness a bit. If you can all believe such a time had happened. Because now Star Wars is eternal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always like that. So, do anyone else have any quotes, or should we move to last act?
I have no quote.
No quotes.
Okay. Let's move on to last act, where we give our final thoughts and our ratings out of 5 pikes. Toni, I don't have to explain it to you. You know the drill. So, you get to go first. What is your rating?
I give this 4.5 ball peen hammers.
Wow, very nice. Are they drippings with gore?
Yeah, they are. Brain matter everywhere. Yes.
Very nice.
Did she take your thing, Becca?
Oh,
Becca was here for
no.
the ball peen. Becca
Oh, no.
It's okay.
You'll just have to include something else on them.
I will.
So I'll let you can go last. Okay,
Thank
so,
you.
So think about
do a
that.
lot of thank you.
Cassie, where are you at?
I give this one, I think, I'm going to give it 4 pikes with a bloody, torn, chewed off ear to bump it up to 4.5, because I've mentioned my few issues with how I wish it could have been handled, but overall, this is one of my favorite ones. It's one of the darkest ones that I think he has, and this is one of the few times he has a male protagonist, and I don't get bored. So I'm here for that.
Well, his male protagonist is far more interesting than most of his male protagonists are.
Yeah, and less creepy. There's no weird VCR stuff in the bathroom.
Yes, so you're at 4.5. Then. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to go with 4. Now, you know what? I am going to go with 4.5 because the quality of the writing is so strong, and it made me want more. It made me want a longer book, and I know he's writing within constraints, and I know he's pushing those constraints dramatically, especially in the length of this book. So I feel like I'm really excited because next week we're going to pull one of his adult books. So, 4.5. And my viscera of choice is the excess meat from his hand, where the girl bit his hand open there. So I feel like it's oozy. And if Stephen King wrote it, there'd probably be some yellow pus seeping through the bandage. Yeah. So, Becca, now you.
Okay. As with Cassie, the whole Nazi thing was kind of weird, but I'm still going to give it, in the world of Pike, 5 anxious Satans holding ball peen hammers.
Okay, hold on. Repeat that.
5 anxious Satans holding.
Anxious Satans. Okay.
Yeah.
Holding ball peen hammers. Wow. 5. That is your first 5.
You are not lying, buddy.
Wow. It only took 22 episodes
this one
to get you to 5 stars.
This one had everything, well, excluding Nazis, because that part was really kind of weird, and that's the only thing that would drop my rating. But we have a guy killing people, and it's bloody, and I'm like, okay,
this really had everything Becca looks for in the book. I think.
This is the book. This is the one. This right here.
Wow, and that catapults it to number 2, behind our still number 1 monster.
Nice.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, so let's do our wrap up. Toni, you want to tell our listeners where they can find more of you and anything you've been up to since the last time you were on here?
Yeah, find me on social, Twitter and Instagram. I am at turtle7313. And my website, if you're interested at all in any of my writing, is splashoftoni.com. And hopefully you'll see my name in a credit sequence one day soon. Fingers crossed.
I hope so too. Yes.
Yeah.
Becca, where can we find you?
Yes, so you can find my blog where I talk about books at astoldbybex.wordpress.com. I am on Instagram at readwithbex, and on Twitter and TikTok at astoldbybex.
And Cassie?
You can find me on social media at Control-Alt-Cassie, and then I also have an art and bookshop. It's shopletsgetgalactic.com.
And you can find me at coopersbeckett.com, at coopersbeckett on all the social media. And Beckett Arts is my my drawing and art channel. Toni, can you hear me? You seem to be muted. Are you muted?
Sorry, that was my fault.
There you
go. I got so scared.
Yeah, I know.
I just want to. So Toni, thank you again for joining us. We will have you back again.
I can't wait. I love hanging out with you guys
down the line. Yeah, we love hanging out with you as well.
And maybe next time it'll be a little bit lighter. We'll do a less Nazi-filled conversation.
Well, I don't think Nazis make as many appearances as like lizard people.
Right,
it's true.
So we probably won't have Nazis next time.
Yes.
Speaking of next time, no, hold on. Cassie, where can they find our show online?
All right. You can find us on all social media at the PikeCast, and we also have a group on Goodreads called Read with the PikeCast, and we have a Discord channel that you can get access to by joining our Patreon.
And super thanks to all our wonderful patrons who believe in us, who support us, and who chat endlessly about all things Pike and teen literature. There's a lot of discussion of the Fear Street trilogy. It's so much fun being on our Discord chat with y'all.
It is.
So listeners, your homework for next time is Pike's first adult novel, The Season of Passage from 1992. I'm very excited because I have not read this. I have not read any of Pike's non-teenager novels. So This is cool. This is very cool. And we'll catch you next time on the PikeCast.
Woo!
Bye!
You survived the night, friends. You can peek out from under your covers and see the first blues of dawn out the window. Thanks for spending the night with the PikeCast, and we hope you'll join us again next time. Until then, Pikers, pleasant dreams.
Okay, let's get back to this and talk about the Nazis less.
Yes. Good call.
Sorry, well, okay, but if we're coming back to, I do have one thing to say about the Nazis.
I'm just saying less. I'm not going to get into philosophical discussions about Nazism.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm actively going against that. So let me bring it back.
So I think
hold on, let me bring the podcast back.
Oh, I thought you said that already.
No.
Sorry.
No, I was telling you all I want to get back.